This weekend, it's conference championship time. This is Incompetent Sports Talk. Welcome to Incompetent Sports Talk, along with Mike Rabin and Jake Burgers. I'm Alex Salzma. That college football coaching carousel keeps spinning around. There are a lot of big-time BCS jobs that are currently open. I'll just name you the list: Colorado, Minnesota, Indiana, Vanderbilt, and Miami, Florida. All of those schools have head coaching vacancies, and so we're going to talk about some of these jobs. I'll start with you, Mike. Which of these jobs, if you were a high-profile college football coach or just a college football coach at all, which one of these is the most desirable?
Well, I think Miami is probably the most desirable just in terms of the history of the program. So I would say Miami is definitely the number one. Number two, I'd probably look at, Colorado. I think Colorado winning a national title in 1990, having sustained success, being a top 25 winningest program in the history of college football. There's a lot of things that you can do there, and people have won there in the past. But I think Miami would have to be number one. It's kind of amazing that Randy Shannon wasn't able to get more done in 4 years there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also with Miami, and I'll ask this to both of you, do you think the fact that Miami, their history with Larry Coker took them to 2 national titles and then had a 9-3 season, and then subsequently did have a bad year where they went to the NPC Computer Bowl and then narrowly beating Nevada, and then gets fired. And then Randy Shannon comes in, he's a Miami guy, seemed to have the support from the athletic director all year, then couldn't get. Do you think that maybe detracts people from wanting to go there?
Well, everyone knows that at Miami you're going to have high expectations, especially within the past 10 years. They've gone to national championships. They expected a lot with their success that they've had in the 80s, 90s, and this decade as well. So I think a coach that goes to a position like that, just as we saw with Mr. Kelly at Notre Dame, they really embrace the challenge of living up to the hype and tradition of those schools, and to get a chance to go to Miami where you can compete for national championships if you recruit from the state of Florida and you beat your in-state rivals. I think a lot of coaches aren't going to shy away from that, and they will find that very attractive.
Yeah, also, too, one of the interesting things, one of the names being thrown around this Miami job, and we'll get to the other jobs, too, eventually, is Mark Richt. Mark Richt was a former quarterback for Miami. Now he's the head coach at Georgia. Seems to be under a little bit of turmoil at Georgia. Some of the fans have thrown him on the hot seat after a 6-6 season this year, last year going 3-5 in the SEC. Do you think, Mike, that Mark Richt, do you think he's looking at Miami as a really possible job that he'd want to jump to?
Yeah, I think he definitely will take a look at it, and I think he might even consider going through the interview process with Miami. But I think ultimately he would be better off staying at Georgia. Yeah, it's been a rough season for Georgia standards this year, but I think based on what he's done in the last 10 years, over 90 wins, winning a bunch of bowl games, winning some BCS bowl games, he's done a really, really good job there. So I think he'll stay at Georgia, but I think he'll entertain the idea.
Yeah. Also, too, Indiana, Vanderbilt, these are some kind of low-level jobs that maybe if you get the right coach in there, they can embrace the challenge. Which one of these jobs do you think probably puts you in the worst situation? I think, for me personally, I think Vanderbilt. And it's not because they have it's not because that they're just in the SEC. It's the fact they don't got a lot of fan support. They're at a school that's traditionally known more for academics, but you're in the SEC East. I know the SEC East is a little bit down this year, but the fact that you have to compete with teams like Florida, Tennessee, even South Carolina, we've seen how they are this year. The fact that you have to compete with them year in, year out in the SEC, I think it puts you at a big disadvantage, and it just makes you really appreciate what Bobby Johnson was able to do. But I found it kind of interesting that Robbie Caldwell decided to resign after a year. You take a look, he comes in, he's the interim coach. They take the interim label off pretty much right away because he was able to impress some people at SEC Media Day. And then now he's resigning. But what do you guys think about it? Which one of these would put you in the toughest situation?
Well, for me, I think Indiana would be a very tough place to go to. Obviously, they're known as a basketball school. The Big Ten has a lot of very good football teams, football powerhouses, with Nebraska coming in now, Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin's up there now. Ohio State's won the last 6 Big Ten conference championships. Iowa's up there. Indiana is a program that mainly funds their basketball program. They don't care as much about football. Obviously, they'd like to have some success there, but they really haven't had that in the past 20 years. I think that's a very difficult situation to get into.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. I think Vanderbilt is the most difficult. I agree with everything Jake says. It's going to be very hard for anybody to go to Indiana and win a Big Ten championship there. I mean, they haven't won the Big Ten since 1967, Minnesota, and Indiana tied that year for the conference championship. Minnesota was the Rose Bowl, but that just shows you how long it's been for Indiana, and they don't have a long history of success of going to bowl games and winning bowl games. Vanderbilt, they don't either. So I think either one of those situations is very precarious, but it's also a challenge because if you go there and you're successful, all of a sudden you're remembered in the lore and the history of Vanderbilt or Indiana for making a change and making that program better. So I would think a lot of coaches would definitely be up to the challenge.
Yeah, and you take a look at Indiana. Bill Lynch was the lowest paid coach in the Big Ten. Now their athletic director, Fred Glass, has said that they want to make a commitment to football. Now obviously we've seen that done with the facilities, what they did to the stadium, putting in one of the largest weight rooms in college football, and he said that they want to pay him more competitively than maybe guys like Bill Lynch was paid. So I think, Indiana, if they're going to show that commitment to football, I think it would be, a good job you would want to get your hands on. Vanderbilt, I just don't really see that commitment to their football program that Indiana is really doing. And I think Colorado presents an interesting challenge too, the fact that they're going to the Pac-12 now. I think that would be an exciting challenge for anybody who's in this situation. Now let's throw out some names. You just pick basically some names. There are some hot commodities out there. I think a guy you have to watch is Brady Hoke over at San Diego State. He's done a terrific job at San Diego State. His second year there, they're already bowl eligible. They're 8-4. They almost beat TCU. This is a good football team, and this team hadn't been to a bowl game since 1998. Now he's got them probably going to the Poinsettia Bowl to play Navy. And now you take a look at what he also did over at Ball State. Ball State is pretty much a graveyard for college football coaches. He goes there and takes them to a 12-win season. I don't care who you are. If you take Ball State to 12 wins, that's impressive. And we've also seen what Stan Parrish has done since then. Nothing. I think Brady Hoke seems to be the special kind of coach that can maybe breathe life into one of these programs. I think he's definitely a guy you got to watch. He's been on Colorado's radar, Minnesota's radar. I think he'd be great for Indiana possibly too. The fact that he has ties to the state of Indiana, definitely has ties to the Midwest, and maybe since he's spent the last couple years in California, maybe that helps him get that California recruiting. I don't know, but what are some names that, I'll start with you, Mike, what are some names that you think could be thrown out there as possible head coaching candidates?
Well, we've talked about it on this program a couple times. I think Kevin Sumlin down at Houston, despite the team being 5-7 this season, they lost Case Keenum earlier in the year. I think that's a big reason why they're not going to a bowl. But Kevin Sumlin, 23-16 at Houston, 2 bowl appearances, 1 bowl victory, Armed Forces Bowl in his first season. I think there's a really strong chance that he'll go to Minnesota. He was the wide receivers and quarterback coach there under Glenn Mason for a year, and he's done a good job at Houston. I think the other name you have to look at is Gus Malzahn at Auburn. And a lot of people, he's the big offensive guru, the offensive mind at Auburn, a big reason why Auburn and Cam Newton's having a lot of success this year. And it's hard for me to imagine him staying at Auburn despite what happens in the next 2 games, which is the SEC championship game and the bowl game or possibly the national title. I think he gets a head coaching job, and if I had to put my money on it, I think we're going to see Gus Malzahn being the coach at Colorado next year.
Jake?
I agree with Kevin Sumlin. He's done a terrific job at Houston. Also, Troy Calhoun's done a very good job at Air Force. And another name, Greg Schiano at Rutgers. He hasn't had that much success this year, but last time when Miami was looking for a coach, he was one of the hot names, as he had Rutgers atop the Big East that year after they were got rid of Coker at Miami. So that's another name to keep an eye on. Another name that is a huge name, not sure if he's interested in coaching college football, but John Gruden. He's been out of coaching in the NFL now for a while. There's some talk that maybe Miami, with all its football history, might attract him a little bit. I think that would be a slam dunk hire. Obviously, he knows his X's and O's. He's led teams to 2 different teams to the Super Bowl in the NFL. I think he'd be a great recruiter, especially in the state of Florida. He would be a slam dunk hire for Miami. I'm not sure if they can compel him to go down to college, though. I think he still wants to coach in the NFL, but that's a name to look out for. Maybe Miami's the place that can lure him in. I think that's the only place of the schools that are looking for a coach that would have the ability to hire him.
Yeah, I love the John Gruden name, and you watch this guy on ESPN. He does specials where he breaks down film with quarterbacks that are going to the NFL. He has specials where he goes and trains with the New Orleans Saints. He has specials where he's coaching his high school son's team and an assistant coach. This guy obviously wants to get into coaching, and when you see these big-time coaches or managers in the baseball perspective, when they go on to ESPN and you always see them constantly around, they want to get back into coaching. They want to get back into management. I think that's something, and you just see his passion, his fire. I think that would suit the college game, but like you said, does he want to go to college? This is a guy who's won a Super Bowl. This is a guy who definitely knows how to coach, and it's really interesting how he kind of fell from graces from Tampa Bay. I know he had a couple seasons there at the end where they didn't go to the playoffs, but definitely a great coach. And I like the Schiano name. I think that's an interesting name because now they're in a different position. They were the rising star of the Big East a couple years ago, and he was considered for the Miami job. This year, right now they're a one-win team in the Big East, and not really to his fault because they've had a lot of injuries. And maybe is this the time where Greg Schiano decides to take that next step up? I think that's something that would be interesting to watch.
And there are a lot of other names that I think people don't think about necessarily. Coach Chris, the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin, look at the year they're having, all the points they're putting up. You know, would he fit in a system like Indiana? I don't know. Right now they run that pistol spread offense. Very difficult to whether or not they go through a transition under him and that he could be successful, and if they'd give him enough time to do something like that. Or would he go to the border rival, go to Minnesota there where they want to establish a power running game? Would maybe that work there? So he's a kind of name that I think we could see him coaching somewhere in the next season as well. And then the name that I think we've forgotten to talk about is Mike Leach. I mean, he's the kind of guy sitting on the sideline. We've heard him call some games on CBS this season. You know, he desperately wants to get back in coaching, I think, as well. But does a team like Minnesota want to take a risk on someone like him with the baggage that he carries? So I think he's another name you have to look at as well.
Yeah, and so a lot of times the question is, do you want to go after someone with proven head coaching experience? You want to go after coordinator? But you look at over the last couple of years, some of the big coordinators that were hired. Charlie Strong, last year, 1 year at Louisville, has his team bowl eligible already. This defense has seen significant improvement. Look at Dan Mullen over at Mississippi State, second year there, has his team ranked 8-4, beat the rivals, went to Florida and won. He's had a great year. And so sometimes I think you give these coordinators a shot. You give them the right opportunity. Gene Chizik didn't work for Iowa State, but he's a coordinator at Auburn, goes to Auburn. Look where they are this year. Mike Stoops never had head coaching experience, goes into Arizona. It takes him 5 years, but he has that team, you know, competing in the Pac-10, going to bowl games. Hadn't gone to bowl games since 1980 before he went there. So I think it'd be interesting to see if he gives some of these coordinators a shot. I like the Malzahn name they threw out earlier.
Yeah, and and this may seem crazy, and I don't know if this will happen. I'm just thinking, you know, Ted Roof down at Auburn, he's moved all over the country. He's at Minnesota defensive coordinator. He's a head coach at Duke. Now he's the defensive coordinator at Auburn. Watch out for someone like him. He's got Auburn. They're the second best rushing defense in the SEC. They're not a great defense, but he's done a lot of things. They've improved significantly. Their front seven has improved significantly from a season ago. So he's got coaching experience. There might be some school that wants to take a shot at him as well.
And one name before we stop talking about this that I want to talk about, Dan McCarney. I'm glad Dan McCarney is back head coaching again. North Texas hired him. Todd Dodge was the coach there before him, was a high school coach, never coached college before, and then it didn't work out, obviously. And now Dan McCarney comes in, somebody with head coaching experience at Iowa State, the most successful head coach in the history of Iowa State, and then, you know, goes to Florida, South Florida, both assistants there, wins a national championship while at Florida as the associate head coach and one of the defensive coaches. I'm just glad to see him. Hayden Fry disciple. Hayden Fry coached in North Texas. He's the most experienced coach to coach at North Texas since Hayden Fry.
Do you think McCartney Colorado gives him another shot? The 70-year-old national championship winning coach.
Yeah, I think
give him another shot.
I'm interested you bring that because he said he would be interested, and I think Colorado fans would flirt with this because of what Bill Snyder's done over at Kansas State, but I think it just wouldn't be a good idea. I think McCartney was a great coach. Obviously, he took Colorado, which is a team that was in the dumps, took them to national prominence, took them to a national championship, but I don't think he's going to do it, and I don't think Colorado should do it because he hasn't even been in coaching since 1994. You take a look at when Bill Snyder came out of retirement. You know, he retired in, I think it was at 04, 05. Only was out of football for a couple of years and then hopped right back into that position. I think he's kind of been off too long, but I think it's interesting you bring that up because there are some Colorado fans who want that.